The mistake happened before anyone raised their voice. A door opened, a badge moved, and a man who thought he owned the street put his hands on something that never belonged to him. That's how wars start. Quiet, stupid, permanent. 125th Street was working that afternoon. Money changing hands, music leaking out of open windows, people minding business that didn't invite trouble. But trouble doesn't wait for invitations. It parks at the corner and watches. She didn't see it coming. Elise Johnson walked like someone who'd never been told to shrink. Books tucked tight, chin up, pace steady, not rushed, not careless. The neighborhood noticed. They always did. Heads nodded. Doors opened a little wider. Respect travels faster than rumors in Harlem. That's when the car idled too long. Inside sat a cop who didn't understand where he was. Big shoulders, red face, new badge. The kind of man who mistook silence for weakness and thought fear was something you could demand. His partner knew better. You could see it in the way his hand stayed glued to the wheel, in the way he didn't look at her too long. "Leave it," he muttered. But the door was already opening. The cop stepped out slow, like the street owed him room. People moved without being asked. Not because they wanted to. Because they'd learned what happens when you don't. Elise was thinking about exams, about bread cooling in a paper bag, about a song she'd heard twice and couldn't forget. She stepped toward the curb. The voice hit her back before she saw the man. "Hey." Not loud, not yet, just enough to claim space. She turned, polite, controlled. "Yes, officer." That was the wrong tone. Some men need submission the way others need air. Her calm scraped against his ego like sandpaper. He stepped closer, too close. Badge catching the sun, baton resting where it could be seen. "You planning on breaking the law today?" "I haven't crossed," she said. "I'm waiting." He smiled, not with his eyes. "Don't play clever." The street slowed, conversations thinned out. This was familiar theater, different actors, same ending. She tried to step back. That's when his hand closed, hard, intentional, fingers digging where they'd leave a memory. Books slipped. Pages fanned across the sidewalk. The bag crumpled under his boot like it offended him. "I didn't say you could move." Pain flashes do strange things. It sharpens sound, makes time stretch. Elise felt the world tilt as he pulled her forward, twisting her arm like it was something to be corrected. "You're hurting me," she said. He liked that part. "I'm the law," he told her loud now for the crowd. "You move when I say, you speak when I allow." Someone stepped forward, stopped, looked at the gun, looked away. The city teaches lessons early. She said one word that should have ended it. "My father." That did it. He leaned in close, breath sour, voice low and cruel. "I don't care who made you." Then he wrenched her arm behind her back and held her there. Not to arrest, not to enforce, just to show. 30 seconds can ruin a lifetime. When he let go, it wasn't mercy. It was boredom. She hit the concrete hard enough to scrape skin and pride at the same time. "Clean your mess," he said, nudging a book toward the gutter. "Next time, walk where I can see you." Laughter followed him back to the car. The street exhaled. Hands reached out, voices whispered. Elise didn't hear any of it. She stood, shaking, and walked. Faster, then faster still. She didn't stop until she reached home. Upstairs, behind drawn curtains and thick walls, Ellsworth Johnson was reading the paper, coffee untouched, mind elsewhere. He heard the door. He heard the sound she tried to swallow. That sound doesn't belong to children who grow up protected. He lowered the paper slowly. What stood in his doorway wasn't just his daughter. It was a message, one written in bruises and disrespect. He crossed the room without a word, sat her down, gave her water, told her to breathe. Then he asked the only question that mattered. "Who?" "A cop," she whispered, "on 125th. He listened, every detail, the car, the face, the way he smiled. When she rolled up her sleeve, the room went cold, 5 marks, deep, confident. He touched them like they were glass. "He said he didn't care who you were," she added. "Said no one could help me." Bumpy stood, went to the window, looked out at the city that answered when he spoke. "He's right," he said quietly. "The mayor couldn't help you." She looked afraid then, not of what had happened, of what might happen next. "What are you going to do?" He didn't raise his voice, didn't pace, didn't curse. "I'm going to remind him," he said, calm as prayer, where he put his hands. When she closed her bedroom door, Bumpy picked up the phone. "Send Nat," he said, and whispers. He hung up and poured a drink he didn't touch. Somewhere across Harlem, a man was finishing his shift, laughing about a girl he'd put in her place. He had no idea the board had already changed, and he had just moved his last piece. Nat and Whispers arrived without knocking. They didn't need to. They took one look at Bumpy's face and understood this wasn't business math. No numbers, no percentages, no negotiations. This was blood arithmetic. "Who crossed you?" Whispers asked. "Not me," Bumpy said. "Worse." He told them exactly what happened. No emotion, just facts, time, place, hands where they didn't belong. Nat's jaw tightened. Whispers smiled once, thin and dangerous. "A uniform," Nat said. "That's reckless." "That's ignorant," Bumpy corrected. "Reckless would be thinking it ends here." Whispers reached for his coat. "I'll find him." "No," Bumpy said, one word, heavy, final. They stopped. "You don't kill men like this fast," Bumpy continued. "Fast deaths don't teach lessons, and shooting a cop makes noise I don't need." He paced once, twice, like a man measuring distance. "He thinks fear belongs to him," Bumpy said. "I want him to feel what it's like when fear walks up quiet and sits beside you." Nat nodded slowly. "So what's the play?" "First," Bumpy said, "I need a name. Then I need him to understand he's visible." They moved fast after that. 125th Street talks when you listen right. Fruit sellers, shoeshine men, a woman who saw everything and forgot nothing. By sundown, the pieces came together. Sean McInnes, transfer, heavy hands, bad reputation that followed him north like a shadow. "He drinks like he hits," Nat reported later. "Hard, mean, likes places where nobody asks questions." "Good," Bumpy said. "Means he won't see it coming." Before moving further, Bumpy made one call, not a threat, a courtesy. The desk sergeant recognized the name immediately. "This is Ellsworth Johnson," Bumpy said. "I'm reporting an assault by one of your officers." A pause, then a chuckle. "Which one of your people got mouthy?" "My daughter." The laugh came back sharper. "Tell her to watch her step." Silence followed, thick, deliberate. "I see," Bumpy said, "so you won't correct it." Click. The line went dead. Bumpy held the receiver a moment longer than necessary. Then he set it down. "That's permission," he said to the room. Night fell thick and sticky. Harlem stayed awake. In a basement that smelled like damp wood and old secrets, Bumpy opened a crate. Inside, hollow and smiling, waited a mannequin. Nat blinked. "You serious?" "Deadly," Bumpy said. "They worked like craftsmen, careful, precise. Red paint for the face, blue fabric stitched just right, a badge close enough to pass at a glance." Then the butcher's bags came out. The smell hit first, copper and rot. They didn't rush it. Shock needs patience. By the time the lid closed, the thing inside didn't look fake anymore. It looked wrong. Like something that should never be found. "Make sure it leaks," Bumpy said. At the precinct, the night shift was bored, coffee stale. Jokes old. The crate hit the tile with a thud. Red spread slow. Someone gagged, someone prayed. When the lid came off, grown men screamed. And 10 minutes later, Sean McInnes walked into a room full of ghosts and saw himself dead. That was the moment fear changed owners. But fear, when embarrassed, doesn't always retreat. Sometimes it drinks. Sometimes it loads a gun. And sometimes it decides to strike back before it understands who it's striking. That night, McInnes wasn't going home. He was heading somewhere loud, and he was about to make the worst decision of his life. McInnes drank like a man trying to drown a memory that knew how to swim. Cheap bourbon, heavy pours, the kind that strips away hesitation and leaves nothing but pride and bad ideas. The bar was familiar. Neutral ground, cops only, no questions, no records. He sat alone at the end, jaw tight, replaying the box, the blood, the way the room screamed before it laughed. That laugh stayed with him. Someone slid onto the stool beside him. Vice detective, crooked smile, eyes that counted exits. "Rough night," the detective said. McInnes didn't answer. "Word travels," the man continued. You embarrassed a whole station." That snapped something loose. "He threatened me," McInnes growled. "A gangster thinks he can scare cops with toys." The detective leaned back. "That gangster owns more secrets than this bar has glasses." McInnes slammed the drink down. "He doesn't own me." The detective studied him carefully. "You're suspended. Go home." McInnes stood instead, swayed, caught himself. "I'm not done," he said. "He wants boxes. I'll give him one he can't open." He left with the weight of a bad future in his pocket. Across town, music died mid-note. The Blue Velvet's door flew open hard enough to crack wood. The doorman stepped forward and went down just as fast, blood spraying the sidewalk. Inside, panic bloomed, gunfire into the ceiling, glass raining down, cash abandoned mid-count. "Where's Johnson?" McInnes roared. Nobody answered fast enough. He smashed a mirror, overturned a table, left the room shaking. Then he said it. "Tell him I'm coming for the girl again." That part mattered. The phone rang before the glass settled. Bumpy was awake. He always was when the city whispered his name. Nat spoke fast, precise. "No drama." "He came back," Nat said. "Waved a gun, hurt Tiny bad, threatened Elise." There was a pause, not shock, calculation. "Bring the car," Bumpy said. "We're visiting someone." They drove south while Harlem slept uneasy, into another neighborhood, another power structure. In a back room that smelled like bread and old money, Bumpy sat across from a man who understood the rules. "I have a problem," Bumpy said. The other man nodded. "I heard." "He won't stop," Bumpy continued. "And if he dies wrong, it brings heat." "So you want him gone," the man said. "Clean." "Erased," Bumpy corrected. The solution came quick. Concrete, early morning, no witnesses. Bumpy stood to leave. "He wants me," Bumpy added. "I'll let him think he found me." Under the bridge, McInnes sat alone, flask empty, fear creeping in now that the bravado wore thin. Then the radio crackled, a voice he trusted, a lie he wanted to believe. "Johnson's moving tonight," the voice said. "Alone." McInnes smiled for the first time in hours. He started the engine. He didn't know the voice was bought. He didn't know the trap was already set. And he didn't know that somewhere in a warehouse full of shadows, Bumpy Johnson was already waiting. Gun empty, room full, no exits, the warehouse breath slow, drip, drip, drip. That sound gets inside a man's head if he's alone long enough. McInnes moved through the dark with his gun raised, every step loud in his own ears. The place felt wrong. Too open. Too quiet, no crates being moved. No voices, no deal, just space. Then he saw him. Bumpy Johnson sat dead center on a wooden crate, suit pressed, hat resting on his knee, cigar burning like it had all the time in the world. No gun in sight, no rush in his posture, waiting. McInnes's confidence surged. This was how legends fell. Alone, caught. "Police," McInnes barked, voice cracking against the steel walls. "Don't move." Bumpy didn't flinch. "You're late," he said calmly. "I don't like late men." McInnes stepped closer, hammer cocked. "Where's the dope?" "There isn't any," Bumpy replied. "Just you." The word echoed. McInnes felt it then, the itch between his shoulders, the sense that the room was bigger than it should be. He cursed, slurred something ugly. "I'll put you down right here," he said. "Say you reached." Bumpy stood, slow, careful, like the moment deserved respect. "You won't," he said, "because you already lost." Click, one sound, then another, then many, metal sliding, boots shifting, breaths held, the shadows unfolded. Men stepped forward from catwalks, behind crates, near doors McInnes never checked. Too many. Faces calm, guns steady, not rushed. The room closed in. McInnes's arm shook. The gun felt heavy now, useless. "I'm a cop," he whispered. "Not tonight," Bumpy said, moving closer. "Tonight you're just a man who made the wrong choice too many times." The gun fell. Nat moved fast. One strike. McInnes crumpled, blood blooming across concrete. He begged after that. Promises, geography. Names of places he'd never go again. Bumpy listened like he always did. Quiet, attentive. "You should have walked away the first time," Bumpy said. "Pride makes men loud. Loud men don't last." Hands grabbed McInnes. dragged him toward the back, toward the van, toward a future that didn't include mornings. He screamed when he understood, when the word foundation made sense. The doors slammed, the engine turned, the sound faded. Bumpy stood alone again. He crushed the cigar under his shoe and checked his watch. Somewhere concrete was being mixed, and somewhere else a young woman slept, unaware that the city had shifted its weight to keep her safe. But power never rests. And consequences don't end when the noise stops. Because by morning, someone important was going to realize a cop never came home. And questions, real questions, were about to start. Morning didn't announce itself, it crept in. Sunlight slid between buildings like it didn't want trouble. Harlem stretched, shook off the night, and kept moving. Kids ran through open hydrants. Vendors argued over change. Life acted normal. That's how you know something's wrong. At the 28th precinct, the chair stayed empty. At first, it didn't matter. Cops ran late. Men disappeared into hangovers. Excuses were easy before coffee. By noon, it was noticed. By afternoon, it was whispered. Captain O'Shea sat behind his desk, door closed, collar damp with sweat. He stared at a phone that hadn't rung and paperwork that suddenly felt heavier than it should. McInnes wasn't answering. No bar had seen him. No patrol logged him. Loose cannons don't vanish quietly. A knock came, a courier, no uniform, no smile, just a small brown package handled like it meant something. She waited until he was alone. Inside sat a badge, clean, polished, wrapped with a strip of white ribbon so neat it felt ceremonial. No note, none needed. She closed the drawer slow, pushed the badge deep behind files no one liked to open. Then he picked up the phone. "Mark Officer McInnes as AWOL," he said. "Start paperwork in 48. He hung up and didn't look out the window. Across the city, concrete trucks rolled before dawn. Men worked fast, holes filled, foundations set, no names spoken, no questions asked. By the time the sun was fully up, something heavy was holding a building steady that hadn't existed the night before. At Lenox Terrace, Elise adjusted the wrap on her arm, bruise fading, pain duller. She paused at the door, hesitating just long enough to remember fear. Bumpy watched from the table. "It's safe," he said, not loud, certain. Outside, a cruiser slowed as she crossed. The young officer inside tipped his cap. Respectful, careful, that mattered. Bumpy waited until she turned the corner before returning to his coffee. He sat at the chessboard and moved a pawn forward. Simple move. Necessary. Because kings don't survive by charging. They survive by making sure everyone else understands the board. Somewhere, a man was being missed. Somewhere else, someone was asking the wrong questions. And somewhere deep in the city's bones, a quiet rule had been reinforced. There are lines you never cross, and hands you never put where they don't belong. The game wasn't over, it never is. The city didn't mourn him, that's the part nobody writes down. No candles, no folded flags, no speeches about service. Just a name that stopped showing up on schedules and a locker that stayed untouched a little too long. Men like McInnes don't leave ghosts, they leave questions. 2 days passed, then 3. A missing person report was filed with no urgency behind it. Paperwork moved slow when nobody pushed. Faster things always had priority. Riots, headlines, politics. And somewhere inside the department, an unspoken agreement settled in. Don't look too hard, because every man in that building remembered the box, the screaming, the moment they realized fear could be turned around and aimed back. Cops talk. Even when they pretend not to, stories traveled the way warnings do. Low, careful, wrapped in jokes that weren't funny. Don't touch his family, don't freelance in Harlem, don't get ambitious where you're not invited. That was the message. Bumpy didn't celebrate, he never did. He understood something most men don't. Violence is loud, but control is quiet, and quiet lasts longer. Still, he stayed alert. Power shifts attract scavengers. A bookmaker skipped a payment. A rival sent feelers. A politician stopped returning calls. Small things, tests, always tests. Bumpy watched them all. He knew someone would eventually try to balance the scales. Someone always believes they can be the exception. The man who does what others wouldn't. That's how the next mistake always begins. Late one night, whispers came in with news. "Word is," he said, "Internal Affairs asked a question today." Bumpy didn't look up. One question becomes two, Whispers added. And two becomes noise, Bumpy replied. He stood and walked to the window again. Same city, same streets, different understanding. They won't find anything, Nat said. We were clean. Clean isn't the same as safe, Bumpy said. It just buys time. He turned back to the room. Time is all I ever wanted. Outside, Harlem breath steady. Inside, the chessboard waited. Somewhere far from the neighborhood, a man with ambition was listening to the wrong people, believing the wrong story about what happened to Sean McInnes, believing it was luck, believing it was chaos, believing there was room to move. Bumpy reached forward and adjusted a piece that hadn't been touched in years, because the board wasn't done teaching lessons, and the next one would be quieter, sharper, and meant for someone who thought they were smarter than the king. The dangerous ones never come loud, they come polite. 2 weeks after McInnes vanished, a man started asking questions the wrong way. Not in Harlem, outside it, downtown bars, union halls, places where cops talked when they thought nobody important was listening. His name didn't matter yet. What mattered was who he thought he was. He wore clean suits and carried himself like rules applied to everyone else. Former prosecutor, new political ambition. The kind of man who believed corruption was something you removed with speeches and subpoenas. He didn't understand ecosystems. He believed McInnes was a loose thread. Pull it hard enough, the whole thing would unravel. So he started pulling. A bartender got asked about a drunk cop who never closed his tab. A clerk got asked about a badge that never turned in. A dock worker got offered money to remember a night he didn't want to remember. That's when the phone rang, not at Bumpy's place, at Whispers. Someone sniffing, Whispers said. Not NYPD, bigger picture. Bumpy didn't answer right away. He was looking at a map. Not streets, not blocks, people, pressure points, old alliances that still breathed if you listen closely. Does he know my name? Bumpy asked. Not yet. Bumpy nodded. He will. That night, Bumpy went somewhere he hadn't needed to visit in years. A quiet restaurant, no music, no crowd, just men who didn't need menus. They spoke softly, carefully. This man, Bumpy said, thinks he's cleaning house. One of the men smiled. Reformers are the easiest to break. They believe they're righteous. I don't want him broken, Bumpy replied. I want him redirected. And if he won't turn? Bumpy folded his napkin. Then he'll learn what McInnes never did. Outside, the city kept pretending nothing had changed. But somewhere in an office with clean windows and big ideas, a man was about to receive a warning he wouldn't understand until it was too late. Because the first warning never sounds like a threat. It sounds like an opportunity. And the men who take it usually disappear next. The invitation came wrapped in respect. No threats, no pressure, just an introduction that felt accidental and wasn't. The man with ambition, clean suit, careful smile received a call from someone he trusted, an old donor, a fixer who'd survived 3 administrations without ever being seen standing too close to the fire. There's a man you should meet, the fixer said. Uptown, smart, connected, could help your career. That word did its work, help. The meeting was set for late afternoon, neutral place. Private room, no names exchanged over the phone. When the man arrived, Bumpy was already there, seated, calm, coffee untouched, eyes measuring everything without looking like they were measuring anything at all. They shook hands. The ambitious man smiled first. That was his mistake. I've heard a lot about you, he said. I doubt that, Bumpy replied. Most of what you've heard is wrong. Most of what's true stays quiet. They sat, no one rushed. The ambitious man started where men like him always do. Order, law, responsibility. He talked about cleaning up departments, about careers built on courage, about history remembering the men who stood firm. Bumpy listened. When the speech ended, Bumpy spoke. You're looking for a missing cop, he said, not a question. The man stiffened just enough to be noticed. He was violent, the man said, uncontrolled, a liability. Then you understand why he's gone, Bumpy replied. The air changed. I don't mean dead, the man said quickly. Neither do I, Bumpy said. Dead men make noise, gone men make space. The ambitious man leaned back, trying to reclaim control. If you know something, it's in your interest to share it. Bumpy smiled then, not warm, not cruel, instructive. You think this is leverage, Bumpy said. It is. This is geography. You're standing in the wrong neighborhood mentally. He leaned forward. That cop crossed a line everyone in this city understands. You can pretend that line doesn't exist, but if you chase it, you'll cross it too. Silence. Bumpy continued. You want to be remembered as a man who cleaned house. I respect that, but houses don't clean themselves by tearing out foundations. The ambitious man swallowed. What are you offering? He asked. A choice, Bumpy said. You can keep pulling threads until you're alone in a room wondering why nobody returns your calls, or you can redirect your energy toward problems that don't bite back. The man stood. I can't promise anything, he said. Bumpy nodded. That's fine. Men like you always think promises matter. They shook hands again. Outside, the man took a long breath, told himself the meeting meant nothing, told himself he was still in control. By morning, 3 donors would stop answering him. By the end of the week, a story would surface, small, legal, inconvenient, that slowed his momentum just enough to hurt. Nothing illegal, nothing obvious, just pressure. That's how you steer men without touching them. Back in Harlem, Bumpy moved another piece. The board was quieter now, but quiet never means empty. It just means the next sound will matter more. Pressure works best when it looks like coincidence. The ambitious man didn't fall. He slowed. That was enough. Campaign meetings got rescheduled. Endorsements cooled. A favor he'd counted on got delayed. Nothing he could point to, nothing he could fight, just resistance where there used to be flow. He started sleeping less, talking more. That's when men reveal themselves. One night he made a call he shouldn't have. Not to the department, not to a judge, to a private investigator with a taste for risky contracts and a habit of billing in cash. I need names, the man said, real ones. The investigator smiled on the other end of the line. He liked jobs where the client was already scared. Word reached Harlem before the investigator finished his first drink. Nat brought it in low. Someone's paying to reopen the hole. Bumpy nodded once. They never learn, he said. They think silence is absence. He stood and buttoned his coat. No anger, no urgency. This one doesn't need to disappear, Bumpy continued. He needs to understand proximity. That night the investigator followed a lead that felt lucky. Too easy. A warehouse contact who answered fast. A door left open just long enough to be noticed. Inside he found nothing. No drugs, no money, no men, just a table, and on it a file, photos, dates, phone records, names he recognized, names he didn't want to. At the bottom sat a single sentence typed clean and centered. Some questions close careers, others close doors. Choose carefully. The investigator left without taking the file. By morning he refunded the money. Downtown, the ambitious man felt it before he understood it, that tightening in the chest, that sense of being seen too clearly. He stopped asking questions. Publicly, he pivoted. New priorities, new causes, clean exits disguised as growth. Privately, he never slept the same again. Harlem noticed. When the city notices, it remembers. Bumpy sat alone later that evening. Lights low, city humming outside like it always had. He didn't feel victorious. He felt settled, control restored, but power doesn't exist in a vacuum. Somewhere beyond Harlem, someone else was watching, someone who didn't care about rules or warnings, someone who saw all of this not as a boundary, but as an invitation, and that man was already moving pieces of his own. The man watching didn't believe in warnings, he believed in outcomes. He wasn't from Harlem. Didn't grow up learning which corners remembered your name and which ones forgot you on purpose. He came from somewhere quieter where power hid behind paperwork and violence wore gloves. He saw what happened to McInnes and didn't flinch. Cops disappear. Reformers stall. That wasn't mythology to him. That was leverage being exercised by someone who understood timing. And he wanted timing of his own. He started by buying distance. Property just outside the neighborhood, nothing flashy, empty storefronts. warehouses nobody cared about, places that could become something later or nothing at all. Then he bought silence. Two men who'd once worked for Bumpy's rivals found envelopes waiting for them. Thick, clean, no instructions, just patience. Patience makes men brave. Whispers caught the first ripple, a name floating where it didn't belong. A question asked twice by two different mouths. Someone's fishing, he said, and they don't scare easy. Bumpy listened, he always did. They won't, he said, not until they understand what they're looking at. He didn't move pieces yet. He waited, because men who rush reveal themselves. 3 nights later, a message arrived the old way. Not a call, not a note, a favor undone. A shipment delayed for no reason that made sense. A door that used to open staying closed just long enough to be noticed. Bumpy smiled once. "There you are," he murmured. Whoever this man was, he wasn't testing boundaries. He was mapping them, and mapping meant intention. Bumpy reached for the board again but stopped short. This wasn't a pawn problem. This was someone aiming at the king without announcing it. Outside, Harlem slept the way it always did, half aware, half ready. Somewhere beyond it, a man convinced himself he'd found the angle no one else had. And by the time he realized the board was already watching him, it would be too late to step back. The first real move came disguised as charity. A youth program proposal, clean paperwork, big promises, basketball courts, after-school meals. The kind of thing nobody argues against without looking heartless. The man behind it never showed his face. He didn't need to. The offer landed on Bumpy's desk through 3 intermediaries, each one swearing it was good for the neighborhood. Bumpy read it once, then again, and then he smiled without humor. "He wants a footprint," Bumpy said, "not goodwill." Nat frowned. "You think it's a front?" "I think it's a measuring tape," Bumpy replied. "He's checking how far he can step before someone says his name." Bumpy let the proposal sit. No yes, no no. Silence is uncomfortable for men who believe momentum belongs to them. 2 days later, one of the men who'd taken an envelope months earlier turned up nervous, talking too much, asking if old debts were still forgiven. Bumpy listened patiently. Then he asked a single question. "Who paid you to remember me?" The man broke. Names came out in pieces, not the architect. Never the architect, just runners, buyers, a shell company with too many lawyers and no history. Enough to confirm what Bumpy already knew. Someone was building something close, too close. That night Bumpy didn't sleep. He sat at the table long after the city quieted, turning a glass slowly in his hand, not drinking, thinking. Power wasn't being challenged directly. It was being surrounded. That's more dangerous. Because men who surround you believe time is on their side. Just before dawn, Bumpy made 2 calls, one north, one east, both answered on the first ring. "I need a favor," Bumpy said. "Not today, not tomorrow, soon." No questions followed. When the sun rose, Harlem woke like always, but underneath the rhythm something tightened. Across the river, the man with clean gloves reviewed reports, numbers, timelines, maps with colored pins. He smiled. From his perspective, everything was moving perfectly. What he didn't see was the space behind him shrinking. He didn't hear the doors closing quietly, and he didn't realize that while he thought he was circling a king, the king had already decided where the board would end. The man with clean gloves finally stepped into the light, not publicly, not foolishly. He arrived through a 3rd name and a 4th company, sat in rooms where men pretended not to recognize him, and spoke in sentences that never committed to anything sharp enough to cut back. He thought that made him untouchable. He was wrong, because power doesn't listen to titles, it listens to patterns. Bumpy saw the pattern clearly now. The youth program, the real estate, the paid memories. It wasn't a takeover, it was a squeeze, slow, legal, respectable. The kind that ends with your name still spoken but your reach shortened. That night, Bumpy chose not to confront him. Confrontation feeds ego. Instead, Bumpy pulled on something older, a favor owed by a man who ran freight, a quiet debt from a banker who'd survived a scandal no one remembered, a judge who liked sleeping without surprises. None of them liked the man with clean gloves because he wasn't loyal, he was efficient, and efficient men don't need allies once they finish climbing. Within a week, permits stalled, loans tightened, inspections multiplied like insects. The youth program lost its building. The shell company lost its patience. The lawyers started charging by the hour instead of the outcome. The man felt it. For the first time, he felt resistance that didn't have a face. He made a call direct this time. "I think we should talk," he said. Bumpy agreed. They met in a room with no windows and no record of who'd been there. The man arrived confident, if thinner around the eyes. "You're blocking me," he said. Bumpy nodded. "You started in my house." "What? I'm not your enemy." Bumpy leaned forward slightly, just enough. "You're worse," he said. "You're a man who thinks systems replace people." The man smiled tightly. "Systems always win." Bumpy returned the smile, smaller, colder. "Only when people forget who built them." They stood, no handshake. As the man turned to leave, Bumpy spoke one last time. "You can keep pushing," he said. "But understand this, if you force me to choose between being patient and being final." He let the sentence die on purpose. The man paused, didn't turn around. For the first time, he wasn't sure which way he was walking. Outside, the city kept breathing. Inside, the board was nearly full. And somewhere between legality and inevitability, the next move was already in motion. The man with clean gloves didn't stop. He adjusted. That's what made him dangerous. He pulled back publicly, let the youth program die quietly, sold off property at a loss that didn't hurt him the way it should have. To the outside world, it looked like retreat. Bumpy knew better. Men like that don't retreat. They reposition. The next pressure didn't come through money or permits. It came through people. A young runner in Harlem got picked up on a minor charge that should have been a warning and turned into a nightmare. Bail denied. Charges stacked. The kind of case that eats futures before a jury ever hears it. Nat brought the news in tight-lipped. "They're fishing low now," he said, "trying to force movement." Bumpy closed his eyes for a moment. "That's desperation," he said. "And desperation makes men sloppy." He stood and reached for his coat. "Where you going, boss?" Whispers asked. "To remind someone," Bumpy replied, "that when you squeeze the wrong hand, it doesn't let go, it closes." They didn't go loud. No threats. No confrontations. They went precise. The judge overseeing the runner's case received a call from a colleague who owed Bumpy his silence. The prosecutor found his star witness suddenly unavailable. The file misplaced itself long enough to matter. By morning, the charges softened. By afternoon, bail was granted. The message was delivered without being spoken. That night, the man with clean gloves stood alone in his office, city lights below him like something he almost owned. He poured a drink he didn't want and stared at a map he no longer trusted. He finally understood. This wasn't about territory or profit or pride. This was about a man who knew how to end games without ever flipping the table. He picked up the phone, not to threaten, to negotiate. But some calls only come when it's already too late. And somewhere in Harlem, Bumpy Johnson sat back down at the board, not to move a piece, but to wait, because the next move wouldn't be his. It would be the other man admitting he was out of time. The phone rang after midnight. That alone said everything. Men who believe they're still winning don't call that late. They wait for morning. They wait for witnesses. They wait for leverage. This call came when the city was quiet enough to hear yourself think. Bumpy let it ring once more than necessary. Then he answered. "I'm listening," he said. The voice on the other end sounded careful now, not weak, measured. The tone of a man choosing words like stepping stones across deep water. "I don't want a war," the man said, "and I don't think you do either." Bumpy said nothing. Silence forces honesty. "I miscalculated," the man continued. "I thought this was about control. I see now it's about balance." "Balance only matters," Bumpy replied calmly, "when you're standing on something that can tip." Another pause. "I want out," the man said, "clean, no surprises." Bumpy leaned back in his chair. "Out isn't a direction," he said, "it's a process." They spoke for 10 minutes. Not long, not short. enough to draw lines that wouldn't need redrawing. No paperwork, no witnesses, no promises written down, just consequences understood. When the call ended, Bumpy stayed seated. Nat watched him. He done. For now, Bumpy said, men like him don't disappear, they remember. And if he comes back? Bumpy's eyes stayed on the board. Then he won't be calling, he said. Outside, Harlem moved through another night unaware of how close it had come to being squeezed by something that didn't love it back. The next morning, the shell companies dissolved. Properties changed hands quietly. The investigator moved out of state. The ambitious man found a different ladder to climb, one far from Harlem. No headlines followed. That was the point. But power never erases memory. Somewhere down the line, someone would ask about the cop who vanished. About the precinct that learned to look the other way. About the invisible boundaries that still held. And when that day came, the city would answer the same way it always had. Not with explanations, with outcomes. Bumpy stood, moved one final piece and covered the board. Not because the game was over, but because this round had been settled. And in Harlem, that was the only ending that ever mattered. Weeks passed. That's when men get careless. When nothing explodes. When nobody knocks. When the city keeps breathing like it forgot the danger ever came close. That's when the real threats stretch their legs. Bumpy felt it before anyone said a word. A hesitation where there used to be flow. A delay that didn't come from fear but from calculation. Different energy. Different math. Someone new was counting. Whispers brought it in late one night, voice lower than usual. West Side money's moving funny, he said. Not loud, organized, and it's not Italian. Bumpy didn't ask who, he already knew what that meant. Younger, Bumpy asked. Hungry, Whispers replied. No history with you, no scars. Bumpy nodded slowly. That's always the most dangerous kind. Men without memory don't respect borders. They don't remember consequences. They hear stories and think stories are exaggerations meant to scare weak people. Those men don't knock, they test. A small numbers spot got leaned on. Nothing violent, just a warning disguised as business. A runner got followed too closely. A message passed that didn't ask permission. Bumpy let it happen. That's what kings do when they want to see who's brave enough to keep walking. He stood at the window that night longer than usual, watching Harlem settle into itself. Same lights, same corners, same rhythm, different future. Somewhere out there, a man was convincing himself that the old rules didn't apply anymore, that the board had aged, that the king had gone soft. Bumpy smiled faintly. Soft men don't survive this long. He turned from the window and picked up the phone, dialing a number he hadn't used since before McInnes made his mistake. When the voice answered, Bumpy spoke calmly. "It's time," he said. "New players don't know where they're standing." The voice on the other end didn't ask who, didn't ask when, just said one word. Understood. Bumpy hung up and returned to the chessboard, uncovering it slowly. The pieces hadn't moved, but the game had. And somewhere in the city, a man who thought he was making his first move was already standing in check. The response didn't come from where the pressure started. It never does. It came sideways. A club owner Bumpy trusted missed a meeting. Not late, absent, phone ringing without intent to answer. By the time Nat tracked him down, the man was sitting in his office, pale, sweating, pretending nothing was wrong. Someone had sat with him, quiet, polite, long enough to make a point. "They didn't threaten me," the man kept saying. "Just talked, asked questions." Those are the worst ones. Bumpy visited him that night, didn't sit, didn't raise his voice. Did they use names? Bumpy asked. The man shook his head. Just ideas. That was confirmation. Ideas mean confidence. Confidence means backing. And backing means this wasn't some reckless crew testing water. This was capital with patience. Bumpy stepped back into the street and felt it clearly now, the shift underfoot. Harlem still moved, still breathed, but something new was pressing against its ribs, looking for leverage. "You were right," Nat said later. "They don't care about territory. They care about access." "That's worse," Bumpy replied. "Territory fights back. Access slips." Bumpy made another call, then another. old bridges, quiet understandings. Men who didn't owe him favors anymore but remembered who kept them alive long enough to stop needing favors at all. By morning, the West Side money felt resistance. Permits delayed, trucks rerouted. A meeting room suddenly unavailable. Nothing illegal, nothing obvious. Enough to irritate, enough to provoke. That's when the message came, not to Bumpy, to one of his lieutenants. A folded note. No signature, just 4 words written clean and confident. This isn't personal, yet Bumpy read it once, then burned it. Yet, he repeated softly, that word means intent. It means someone believes time belongs to them. Bumpy looked out over the neighborhood again, eyes calm, mind already stepping 3 moves ahead. Good, he said. Let's see how patient they really are. Because men who threaten the future always forget one thing. The present still belongs to whoever controls it. And somewhere nearby, a new player was about to learn the cost of using that word too early. Patience cracked first, it always does. The new money made a mistake Harlem never forgives. They rushed a shortcut. A warehouse deal pushed through without permission. A supplier leaned on that had already sworn loyalty elsewhere. Quiet moves, but not quiet enough. Bumpy heard about it before the ink dried. They're skipping steps, Nat said, trying to plant flags fast. That means they're nervous, Bumpy replied, or arrogant. Which one's worse? They're the same thing, Bumpy said, just different endings. Bumpy didn't shut it down immediately. He let the deal breathe. Let trucks roll once. Let optimism grow. Then all at once the floor disappeared. The supplier backed out. Claimed misunderstanding. The warehouse owner suddenly discovered zoning issues. A bank froze funds over a compliance review no one could explain. Within 48 hours, the shortcut became a sinkhole. That's when the new player finally showed his face. Not in person, in anger. One of Bumpy's runners was grabbed in broad daylight. No beating, no blood. Just a hard warning whispered close enough to feel on the skin. Tell your boss this can get ugly. The runner did exactly that. Bumpy listened without interrupting. Then he stood. That's the move, he said. They've shown their hand. Nat shifted. You want us to respond? No, Bumpy said. I want them to respond. That night, Bumpy arranged a meeting they didn't know they were attending. A banker got a call. A union man remembered an old favor. A shipping manager suddenly reconsidered a partnership he'd been excited about just hours earlier. By morning, the new money's operation wasn't stalled. It was isolated. Phones rang without answers. Meetings happened without them. Deals moved around them like water around stone. Isolation does something special to men who think they're powerful. It makes them loud. And loud men start making promises they can't keep. By the end of the week, one of their own tried to defect. He came in shaking, offering names, routes, numbers. Bumpy heard him out, then asked one question. Do they know you're here? The man hesitated. Bumpy nodded. That's what I thought. He let the man leave with his life and nothing else. Sometimes mercy is the loudest threat. From a distance, the new player watched his circle shrink. Watched confidence leak into frustration. He told himself this wasn't over. He told himself he still had options. He didn't realize he was down to one. And that option was about to walk straight into Harlem, believing a final show of force would change everything. It wouldn't. It would just end the waiting. The final option always looks like courage to the man running out of time. The new player came in person. No entourage. No apology. Just confidence sharpened into something brittle. He chose a public place on purpose. A restaurant where people pretended not to listen, where witnesses blurred into background noise. He sat down across from Bumpy without asking. That's brave, Bumpy said calmly, or careless. The man smiled. Depends who's telling the story. He spoke fast, too fast. Words stacked on words. He talked about partnerships, about new eras, about how Harlem didn't need to be locked in old arrangements. Bumpy let him talk. That's how you learn what a man believes. And if I don't agree? Bumpy asked. The man leaned in, lowered his voice. Then things get uncomfortable for people you care about. The room didn't change. Bumpy's expression didn't either. He sipped his coffee. Do you know why men like you never last here? Bumpy asked. The man frowned. Because you scare them. No, Bumpy said. Because you announce consequences before you own them. He stood. The man hesitated, suddenly unsure if this was over or just beginning. Bumpy leaned down close enough for only him to hear. You walked in thinking force ends conversations, Bumpy said softly. It doesn't. It just tells me you're done talking. He straightened and walked out without looking back. Outside, Nat was already waiting, everything set. Nat asked. Bumpy nodded once. Inside the restaurant, the man sat alone now. He checked his watch, then his phone, no signal. That's when he noticed the room had emptied too quietly, that the staff was gone, that the exits felt farther away than they should have been. Somewhere in the city, engines turned over, doors closed, and a man who thought he'd made his boldest move realized too late. He just stepped onto the wrong square. The board was about to answer. The room didn't erupt. That's what surprised him. No shouting, no guns drawn, no chaos to fight against. Just quiet settling in like a decision already made. Two men stepped out from the back hallway, not rushed, not angry. One locked the front door. The other turned the sign to closed. The new player stood. Easy, he said, forcing a laugh that didn't land. This isn't necessary. One of the men spoke, voice even. Sit down. He didn't. That was mistake number one. The second came when he reached inside his jacket. He never finished the motion. Hands grabbed him from behind, efficient and practiced. No punches, no drama. They walked him out the side door like a drunk who needed air. A car waited, engine running, trunk already open. He saw it then, not fear yet, understanding. Wait, he said. We can still. The trunk closed hard. The car pulled away smooth, blending into traffic that didn't care. Across town, Bumpy stood at his window again. Same view, same streets, different balance. Nat joined him. You want to know where they're taking him? Nat asked. Bumpy shook his head. Doesn't matter, he said. What matters is what doesn't happen tomorrow. No retaliation, no phone calls, no replacement stepping forward. By morning, the West Side money folded in on itself. Properties sold, shells dissolved. Men relocated quietly to places that didn't remember them. The city adjusted, it always does. Later that afternoon, whispers brought news. They found his car, he said. Abandoned, no blood, no signs. Bumpy nodded. Missing, he said. That's the right word. Whispers hesitated. And if someone comes looking? Bumpy finally turned from the window. Then we'll see who taught them to ask questions, he said. He sat down at the chessboard one last time and moved nothing. Some games don't need a final move. They just need everyone to understand who's still sitting at the table. Outside, Harlem carried on. Music, laughter, life. And somewhere far from the neighborhood, a man who thought power could be bought learned the oldest lesson the city knows. Control isn't taken, it's allowed. And once that allowance is gone, there's no getting it back. Harlem didn't celebrate, it absorbed. That's what neighborhoods like this do when something heavy gets settled. They don't clap, they don't talk. They adjust their breathing and keep moving. A corner reopened. A club turned its music back up. A route that had gone quiet found its rhythm again. Normal is the reward for order. Bumpy felt the calm, but he didn't relax into it. Calm after pressure is when echoes show up. The kind you don't hear unless you're listening for them. Nat brought the last report just before dusk. No one's asking, he said. Not officially, not unofficially. That's good, Bumpy replied. Means the lesson traveled faster than the story. He stood by the window as evening laid its colors across the city. Somewhere below, a man laughed too loud. Somewhere else, another man decided not to ask a question he'd been practicing all day. Influence works like that, but Bumpy's eyes narrowed slightly. Because peace never comes alone. It brings observers. Somewhere beyond Harlem, beyond the deals, beyond the names already erased, someone was taking notes. Not reacting, not testing. Watching. That kind of man doesn't rush. He studies endings to learn beginnings. Bumpy closed the curtain. Not yet, he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. He returned to the table, placed the board back where it belonged, and reset the pieces carefully. Everyone in its place. Everyone waiting. Because Harlem was quiet again. and quiet is when the next game decides whether it wants to start. The watcher finally made a sound, not a threat, not a move, a question. It came through a man Bumpy hadn't heard from in years. Old voice, old connection, someone who only reached out when the wind changed direction. "You got company," the voice said, "not local." Bumpy didn't ask for details. Details come later. "What kind?" he asked. "Patient," the voice replied. "Careful, doesn't touch what he can't afford to lose." That narrowed it down. Bumpy hung up and stood still for a long moment, listening to the building settle around him, pipes ticking, distant sirens. Life continuing the way it always pretends nothing is wrong. Patience was the dangerous word. Impatient men crash, patient men replace you. By midnight, the first sign appeared, subtle enough to miss if you weren't looking for it. A meeting canceled with no explanation. A favor returned politely instead of warmly. A door that still opened, but slower. Not resistance, recalibration. Someone wasn't challenging Bumpy's power. They were studying its shape. Bumpy sat at the chessboard and didn't touch a piece. He just stared at the setup, seeing not what was there, but what could be removed without anyone noticing. "That's smart," he said quietly. Nat appeared in the doorway. "We move." "Not yet," Bumpy replied. "He wants to see if I blink." "And if you don't?" Bumpy finally smiled, small, controlled. "Then he'll have to decide," he said, "whether he's watching a king or waiting to become one." Outside, Harlem slept with one eye open, unaware that somewhere beyond its borders, a man was deciding whether this neighborhood was a lesson to be learned or a prize worth taking, and that decision, once made, never gets undone. The decision came without announcement. That's how the careful ones do it. No noise, no warning. Just a shift in the air that only men like Bumpy notice. The kind that tells you someone just committed to the move they can't walk back from. It showed up as efficiency. A supplier who'd never missed a deadline suddenly delivered early to the wrong place. A bill that should have been forgiven was paid in full on time without conversation. A favor that once required a call now came with a contract attached. Clean, professional, cold. Bumpy studied it all and understood. The watcher wasn't circling anymore. He was building parallel. That's the most dangerous form of ambition, when a man doesn't try to take your throne but constructs a second one close enough that people start choosing sides without realizing they're choosing. Nat felt it too. "He's not pushing," Nat said. "He's offering alternatives." Bumpy nodded. Alternatives kill empires faster than bullets. He didn't rush to crush it. Crushing draws attention. Instead, Bumpy made a single adjustment that looked like nothing to anyone else. A meeting moved locations. A payment shifted hands. A conversation that usually happened in private took place where it could be seen. Signals. Letting the watcher know, "I see you seeing me." The response came the next night. A man approached Nat on the street, polite, well-dressed, no threats in his voice. "He says his boss wants to talk," Nat reported later. "Just talk." Bumpy leaned back in his chair. "Of course he does," he said. "That's the moment." Nat hesitated. "You think it's safe?" Bumpy's gaze hardened, not angry, not afraid. "It's never safe," he said. "It's just necessary." He stood and reached for his coat. This meeting wouldn't be about territory, or money, or even power. It would be about philosophy. Two men deciding whether the city was big enough for both of their ideas of control, and whichever vision walked away from that room intact would decide the shape of Harlem's future. The door closed behind Bumpy. Somewhere else, a patient man waited, confident, composed, convinced he'd finally reached the part of the game where kings negotiate. He didn't yet understand. This wasn't negotiation. This was evaluation, and not everyone passes. The room was chosen carefully. No windows, no mirrors, no history, just a table, 3 chairs, and the kind of lighting that doesn't flatter anyone. The watcher arrived first, mid-40s. Calm posture, suit that cost money without advertising it. Hands folded, eyes alert but not searching. He didn't look like a man who fought for power. He looked like a man who inherited it. When Bumpy entered, the watcher stood, not out of fear, out of calculation. "Mr. Johnson," he said, "I appreciate you coming." Bumpy didn't sit right away. He looked around once, then met the man's eyes. "You've been busy," Bumpy said. The watcher smiled faintly. "So have you." They sat. No drinks were ordered, no small talk wasted. "I won't insult you," the watcher said. "I'm not here to challenge what you've built. I'm here because cities change, and I believe I can help guide that change." Bumpy leaned back. "Help who?" he asked. The watcher didn't hesitate. "Everyone who survives it." That answer told Bumpy everything. "You build alternatives," Bumpy said. "Parallel systems, cleaner, quieter." The watcher nodded. "Violence ages poorly, influence does." Bumpy studied him. "You think influence is neutral?" "I think it's inevitable." Silence followed. Then Bumpy spoke again, voice low, steady. "You've been careful," he said. "That's why you're still breathing in my city." The watcher smiled. "And you're still sitting here. That means you see value." Bumpy's eyes hardened just a fraction. "I see risk," he said, "and I see men who confuse patience with permission." The watcher leaned forward now, just slightly. "I don't want your throne," he said. "I want the future. We can coexist." That word landed heavy. Coexist. Bumpy stood. The watcher frowned for the first time. "This isn't finished," the man said. Bumpy buttoned his coat. "No," he agreed. "It's just started." As Bumpy reached the door, he paused. "One thing," he said without turning. "Men who build quiet empires forget something." The watcher waited. "Quiet still makes a sound," Bumpy finished, "and I hear everything." He left the room. The watcher sat alone, staring at the door long after it closed. For the first time since he'd started watching Harlem, doubt crept in. Not fear, uncertainty, because he couldn't tell if he'd just met a man willing to share power, or a man deciding exactly how much time he had left. And outside, in the streets he thought he understood, the city shifted again, subtly, deliberately, like it was choosing sides before anyone announced a war. The question wasn't if the board would change, it was how violently, and who would still be standing when it did. The watcher didn't sleep that night. Men like him rarely do after meetings like that, not because they're afraid, but because they're recalculating, running outcomes, measuring how much space is left between confidence and consequence. By morning, his operation shifted again, not louder, sharper. A deal that should have gone Bumpy's way stalled at the last signature. A longtime associate received an offer too generous to refuse and too clean to trace. Nothing hostile, nothing obvious, just pressure with manners. That's how modern wars begin. Nat brought the updates in one by one. He's not breaking rules, he's rewriting habits. Bumpy listened without comment. He's trying to make us irrelevant, whispers added. Not dead, forgotten. That earned a quiet nod. Smart, Bumpy said. That's how you kill kings without blood. He stood and walked to the window, watching Harlem wake again. Same rhythm, same corners, but even cities feel tension before storms. You can hear it in the pauses between sounds. He thinks this is about efficiency, Bumpy continued. About systems replacing men. Nat waited. He's wrong, Bumpy said. This is about loyalty, and loyalty doesn't migrate clean. Bumpy turned back to the room. Let him build, he said. Let him offer his future. Nat frowned. And we do nothing. We do memory, Bumpy replied. We remind people why they chose us in the first place. That day no threats went out. No deals were blocked. No warnings delivered. Instead, Bumpy showed up. At a funeral, at a christening, at a storefront opening nobody important was supposed to notice. He didn't speak much. He didn't promise anything. He was just present, and presence carries weight no contract can match. By nightfall, word reached the watcher, quietly, carefully. He's moving, one of his men said. Not against us, around us. The watcher frowned. That wasn't in the projections. Across the city, Bumpy sat alone again, chessboard untouched. He wasn't thinking about the next move. He was thinking about the end game. Because men like the Watcher only lose when they finally understand something too late. You can replace violence, you can replace money, but you can't replace a man the city itself has decided to protect. and the city was starting to remember exactly who had been there first. The question now was whether the Watcher would strike. It was whether he'd realize in time that striking might be the only move he had left. The Watcher felt it slipping, not crashing, not collapsing, drifting. That's worse. His people still answered calls, deals still moved, money still flowed, but the warmth was gone. Conversations ended quicker. Meetings started later. Smiles didn't last. He called it friction. He hated friction. In his world, resistance meant inefficiency. Inefficiency meant failure. And failure was something he'd trained his whole life to avoid, so he adjusted again. This time he reached for legitimacy. A councilman, a redevelopment committee, a press piece drafted but not yet printed. The story was simple, clean, safe. New investment reshapes Harlem's future. No names dragged, no accusations made, just implication. Bumpy read the draft and folded it carefully. "They're trying to outgrow me," he said. Nat shook his head. "They're trying to outshine you." Bumpy smiled faintly. Same mistake. That evening, Bumpy made one appearance he hadn't planned on. He walked into a meeting he wasn't invited to. No entourage, no announcement. Just Bumpy Johnson stepping into a room full of men who'd convinced themselves he was part of the past. The room froze, not fear. Recognition. Bumpy didn't take the head of the table, didn't need to. He leaned against the wall, hands relaxed. "You planning a future," he said calmly. "That doesn't include the people already living in it." The councilman cleared his throat. "This is a private." "I know," Bumpy replied. "That's why I came." Silence followed. Then Bumpy spoke again. "Harlem doesn't need saving," he said. "It needs remembering, and men who forget what holds a place together always end up building on sand." No threats, no demands, just truth delivered without apology. He left before anyone found the courage to speak. By morning, the article stalled. The committee postponed. The councilman returned calls he hadn't meant to. Across the river, the Watcher stared at a map with too many pins and not enough movement. For the first time, he felt cornered without walls. He understood now. This wasn't a fight he could win by replacing the old ways, because the old ways were still breathing, still watching, and now they were standing up again. The Watcher poured a drink he didn't finish. He had one move left, and it wasn't clean, not anymore. The last move never looks like strategy. It looks like impulse dressed up as resolve. The Watcher crossed a line he'd sworn he wouldn't. Not publicly, not loudly, but in a way that couldn't be walked back once it started. A fire inspector showed up unannounced at a place that had passed every inspection for years. A liquor license review got fast-tracked. A bank account froze overnight with no explanation attached. Pressure finally sharpened. Nat brought the news in with a tight jaw. "He's testing how much pain we'll tolerate." Bumpy didn't answer right away. He sat still, hands folded, eyes unfocused, not on the room but on the city itself, like he was listening for something underneath the noise. "That's not pressure," Bumpy said finally. "That's frustration." "And frustration escalates," Whispers added. "Yes," Bumpy agreed, "and it gets sloppy." That night Bumpy didn't make calls, he waited. Men who escalate want reaction, they want proof they still matter. By morning, the Watcher made his real mistake. He sent a message, not to Bumpy, to someone close enough that the message couldn't be ignored. Polite words, professional tone. A reminder that safety was fragile when systems changed hands. When Nat read it aloud, the room went quiet. Bumpy stood. That was the difference. When men like Bumpy sit there thinking, when they stand, they've decided. "This ends," Bumpy said, not angry, not loud, certain. "And it ends now." Nat nodded. "You want him scared?" "No," Bumpy replied, reaching for his coat. "I want him understood." Outside, Harlem moved like it always had, unaware that the calm it enjoyed was about to be defended one last time. Somewhere else, the Watcher convinced himself he'd forced the issue, that the king would finally have to react. He didn't realize the board had already shifted beneath his feet. And by the time he felt it tilt, there would be nowhere left to stand. The Watcher didn't know where it started. That's what unsettled him. No explosions, no arrests, no men showing up at his door, just subtraction. A bank officer stopped returning calls. A consultant resigned for personal reasons. A zoning appeal vanished into a backlog that didn't exist yesterday. He told himself it was coincidence. Then a man he trusted because he'd never failed him, asked for a meeting in person. Not at the office, not on the books, a diner, early, quiet. The man wouldn't meet his eyes. "They know," the man said finally. "Know what?" The watcher asked, though his stomach already understood. "Everything," the man replied. "Not the details, the shape. They know what you're trying to become." The watcher leaned back, jaw tight. "That's not illegal." "What?" "No," the man said, "but it's dangerous." That word landed heavy. By noon, 3 more calls came in, all different voices, same hesitation, same careful distance. By dusk, the watcher sat alone in his office, lights off, city glowing beneath him like something that no longer belonged to him. He finally did what he should have done weeks ago. He called Bumpy. The line rang once, twice, answered. "You moved fast," the watcher said. "Not fast," Bumpy replied calmly. "Correct." A pause. "You're dismantling me," the watcher said, quietly. "You dismantled yourself," Bumpy said. "I just stopped holding the pieces together." The watcher swallowed. "What do you want?" Silence stretched, then Bumpy spoke. "I want you to leave Harlem," he said. "Not angry, not broken, just gone." "That's it." "What?" "For you," Bumpy replied, "that's mercy." The watcher laughed softly. It sounded thin. "And if I don't?" Bumpy's voice didn't change. "Then the city finishes the conversation for me." The call ended. The watcher sat there long after, staring at a future that had suddenly lost all its exits. He had one option left. It wasn't clean. It wasn't smart. But it was loud. And loud was the only language he had left. Somewhere in Harlem, Bumpy Johnson stood by the window, already aware the watcher wouldn't choose mercy. Because men who believe in systems always make the same final mistake. They think noise creates leverage, and noise is exactly how you tell the city where to strike next. The watcher chose noise. He didn't announce it. He didn't threaten. He let it break all at once, the way desperate men do when they mistake disruption for control. A raid, clean on paper, ugly in execution, inspectors, plainclothes, cameras tipped just right to catch panic instead of facts. A place that fed half a block went dark in under an hour, doors sealed, licenses under review. Workers sent home with nowhere to go and nobody to blame. That was the message. Harlem felt it immediately, not fear, anger. That's the difference outsiders never understand. Fear scatters people. Anger aligns them. Phones rang across the neighborhood, not to Bumpy, but about him. Is he going to let this stand? Does he know? What happens next? Bumpy didn't rush. He walked down the block into the noise. Past the shuttered doors and the men standing around pretending they weren't watching him for a sign. He stopped in front of the sealed place and looked at the notice taped crooked to the glass. Then he turned to the crowd. "They'll open it," he said calmly, "today." Someone asked how. Bumpy didn't answer. He didn't need to. Across town, the watcher sat in a conference room with people who suddenly looked uncomfortable being associated with him. The raid had gone public faster than he expected. The footage didn't play the way it was supposed to. Too aggressive, too clean, too targeted. That's when the call came, not from Bumpy, from someone higher up than either of them. The watcher listened, tried to explain, tried to justify. He didn't get far. By the time the call ended, he understood. This wasn't a chess match anymore. He'd made it visible, and visibility kills men like him. By mid-afternoon, the seals came off. The doors reopened. The apology came without names attached. The watcher packed his office that night. No farewell emails, no exit interview, just boxes and a future that didn't include this city. A week later, his name stopped circulating. Not disgraced, not destroyed, removed. That's the cleanest ending there is. Bumpy stood at the window once more as Harlem settled back into itself. Music returned. Laughter followed. Life resumed where it had paused. Nat came up beside him. "It's over," Nat said. Bumpy nodded. "For now." He returned to the table, not to play, but to straighten the board. Pieces aligned. order restored, because kings don't need the last word. They just need the city to keep breathing the way it should. And Harlem did. Quiet, alert, protected. The game continued, always does. But tonight everyone remembered who it belonged to. The city didn't thank him. That's how Bumpy knew it was right. No speeches, no gratitude dressed up as loyalty. Just Harlem settling back into itself like a shoulder rolling loose after carrying too much weight. The place that got shut down filled up again. Same faces, same laughs, different understanding. People didn't talk about what happened. They don't when survival is involved. They just remembered. Weeks passed, then more. No new players rushed in. No quiet systems tried to replace what already worked. Men who had been watching decided to keep watching from somewhere safer. Distance is a form of respect. Bumpy stayed visible but not loud, a presence, not a warning. He showed up where it mattered and disappeared where it didn't. That's how power lasts. One night, Elise sat across from him at the table studying. "You look tired," she said. Bumpy smiled. "That's how you know the city's sleeping." She nodded, not asking more. She didn't need details. She learned early that some protection comes at a cost you don't inspect too closely. After she went to bed, Bumpy sat alone. No phone, no visitors, no fires to put out, just the board. He didn't play, he never did at the end. He simply looked at it, seeing not pieces but patterns. Men who rush, men who wait, men who mistake opportunity for permission. Outside, Harlem breath steady. Somewhere far away, someone was already thinking about testing it again. There's always someone. There always will be, but they'd move slower now, carefully, because the last few who tried didn't vanish loudly, they just stopped mattering. Bumpy covered the board and turned out the light, not because the game was over, but because it was under control. And in Harlem, that's the only ending that ever really counts. Control doesn't announce itself, it settles. Harlem didn't change after that. That's what outsiders never understood. When power is right, nothing looks different. Streets still hum, kids still run, men still argue over nothing and everything. Life keeps its rhythm. That rhythm is the reward. Bumpy walked the neighborhood one evening just before dusk. No suit, no entourage. Just a man moving through a place that knew his footsteps. Heads nodded, doors opened. Conversations paused, then resumed. Not fear, acknowledgement, that's stronger. He stopped once, watching a group of young men laugh too loud on a corner, hungry, confident, full of ideas that hadn't learned consequences yet. One of them noticed Bumpy watching and straightened up instinctively. Bumpy didn't scold him, didn't warn him, just held his gaze long enough for the lesson to arrive on its own. Then he kept walking. Back at home, the apartment was quiet, Elise asleep, the city breathing through the windows. Bumpy sat at the table and uncovered the chessboard one last time. He didn't move a piece. He never needed to, because the real board wasn't wood and ivory. It was streets and loyalties. Memory and consequence. Knowing when to step forward and when to let the city step for you. Men would come again, they always do, with new money, new ideas, new confidence. And Harlem would test them the same way it always had, patiently, thoroughly, without mercy. Bumpy covered the board, turned off the lamp, and let the dark settle in. Somewhere out there, another man was already dreaming of being king. He just didn't know yet. The throne was occupied, and the city was watching. Years later, people would argue about what really happened. They detail it wrong on purpose. Some would say the city cleaned itself up. Others would say the trouble just moved somewhere else. A few would swear nothing ever happened at all. That's how legends survive, blurred at the edges, sharpened in the middle. What never changed was Harlem's posture. It stood the same way it always had, chin up, shoulders square. A neighborhood that learned long before anyone put words to it that power isn't about noise or fear, it's about memory. Men came and went. Names rotated. Suits got cleaner. Money learned new routes. But every once in a while, someone new would ask the same quiet question in the wrong tone. Who really runs this place? The answer never came as a name. It came as a pause, a look, a decision not to continue the conversation. Ellsworth Johnson didn't need statues, didn't need plaques or stories carved clean enough to survive daylight. He lived where it mattered, in how people moved and what they chose not to do, in the invisible lines nobody crossed unless they wanted to disappear from the math. Late at night, when the city settled into that deep hum only real places make, it felt like Harlem remembered him on its own. Not as a man, as a standard. And somewhere, some future king would mistake that calm for absence and think it was finally his turn. That's always how it begins. But the city would know better. It always does.